don't forget that you have to have a life and do something that makes you happy along the way. So if that means if you take a month off or 2 months off after graduation while you're applying for jobs and do something bananas, that's the time to do it, because I didn't. I went straight from job to job to job. So after a year in industry, I actually walked into my boss's office one day and said, I'm going to quit and go backpack Europe.
Hi, this is Shea Murtaugh. I'm the founder and president of Hoffmann Murtaugh, and welcome to the HMDL podcast. This is where we discuss all things about media marketing and advertising, tools, tips, and tricks, and firsthand experience to growing yourself professionally and personally. I'm very excited today to be joined by Geah Pressgrove. She is the associate professor in advertising and public relations and the program chair at West Virginia University. Welcome, Geah. Thank you for being on the HMDL podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
So I think the first question I'd like to get into is really tell us a little bit, tell our audience a little bit about what you do now and how you got there. Like, why are you teaching? I'm sure you went into the advertising careers, and I know that you've done that. So talk a little bit about why you're now teaching and how you got yourself here.
Sure thing. So when I finished my undergraduate degree in advertising, I had actually been working at a boutique integrated marketing communications firm based out of Louisville, Kentucky. And I found that really the things that I enjoyed the most at the firm were more public relations functions. So I decided at that point I was going to go back and get my graduate degree, but I really wanted to make the leap and geography wise and move from Kentucky to South Carolina. So I did that. I got my master's degree in integrated marketing communications from the University of South Carolina to give myself a better sort of perspective on the field as opposed to being sort of narrowly focused in one area. I wanted to diversify my skill set. And as part of that program, the final component of that graduate degree was actually a practicum where I was to work someplace and write a plan based on one of the projects that I worked on. And in doing that, I worked at another boutique firm, which was really always going to be, I think, my preference because it's sort of the controlled schizophrenia of that environment. And as my practicum project, I worked on marketing and promotions for a festival for about 40,000 people. And that first year of the build up and the promotion, and it got rained out. It was the first time in the festival's history that it had ever gotten rained out, and they didn't have a crisis plan. So ended up really learning a lot in that time. And the agency that I was working for thought that I was good on my feet in that tough situation, and they kept me on, and I ended up working there for about a decade. And their expertise was really in political communications. And my expertise really sort of emerged in event planning and nonprofit and advocacy work. So worked there for a while. And while I was there, the University of South Carolina reached out to me and asked me if I would be an adjunct. And I decided that I would take on that challenge and did that. And then realized I loved teaching and that event planning wasn't a sustainable career for me personally. It involves a lot of nights and weekends. So I went on to get my PhD because I wanted to be able to be a classroom instructor and do research on the field that I love. And so that's sort of my career trajectory. I did end up in that time also working at another agency and working with some major entertainment properties like TNT, Bravo, ESPN, et cetera, at another boutique firm. So I don't know, it's been a wild ride, and that's me. That's how I got here.
Yeah, I'm curious. You think when you're younger and you think about your dream job and where you're going. I mean, if you looked at yourself today or you talked to yourself back then, would you say I'm going to be a very important professor at the VU teaching a lot of students about media and careers in media? So NPR. So did you think that sometimes I think that way even on my end, if my older self would tell my younger self now that I would own an advertising agency, I'd be very shocked.
Yeah, so, I absolutely, definitely did not see myself as a stodgy classroom professor. Like, no, that's not me. I'm never going to do that. I'm going to be the agency girl. I'm going to be working with all those accounts, and it's going to be great. And at some point, I just kind of needed to make a shift and a change. And I did it in my late 30s, which was tough because I went from a really great job that I was very successful in and being paid very well to being a broke college kid again in my late 30s. And it was an interesting and tough transition, but in the grand scheme of things, it was completely worth it. So never be afraid to make tough decisions and make hard leaps, because sometimes it pays off in big dividends.
Yeah, and that's usually a lesson that every time we have somebody on our podcast, it's always those kind of answers. Be ready for change, be ready to maybe take a big risk that you don't kind of understand where you're going to go. And because on the back end, you're very happy with that change. So what is the favorite part of your job?
Well, so my job, and I don't know if other folks know this, but college professors' jobs often fall into three buckets. There's one bucket, teaching, which everybody sees. But actually, that's only 40% of my contract. It's only 40% of what I do. Another 40% is focused on research, where I'm exploring, developing theories, and developing new measurement models, exploring concepts, trends, things that are happening in industry. And then another 10% is supposed to be service. I am the ad PR program chair for our college. And then I also serve on a lot of national boards, advise some student organizations and things of that nature. So across those three buckets, there's things that I like about each. I love those days where I get data and I get to dig in and I find really cool insights in my research. I love those days when my kids tackle tough concepts or make big progress. And I love to see victory and rewards in my colleagues through my administrative roles. So
for every student that's listening right now, because we try to target students before entering their careers to kind of say, what can they learn from us before they join in? What do you think is important to be a successful student, especially in this field?
I bet I'm not going to say anything different than most of your other guests. The never stop learning, always be curious is really big for me. I know there's a lot of students who will come into my classroom who you've actually hired one of them who is a high-end overachiever, never gives up until she perfects everything. And that's fantastic. I love those students, but I also like the students who come in and they're still trying to figure it out and they're equally curious and equally passionate, but it looks different. So your curiosity and your passion doesn't have to be the overachiever who's involved in every student organization and had 15 internships, but be open, be curious is really the big thing, I think, in any classroom.
Yeah, and I always try to give the lesson out to college grads. When I first graduated college, I didn't really have any of it figured out. And so it took me some time. And so I still ended up where I am now, really kind of, slowly getting into it. And I think students, when you say students today have a lot of pressure on them to kind of make it happen immediately right when they graduate. And so how do you help a student kind of feel a little bit less anxious about entering the workforce?
I tell them a couple of personal stories that I probably shouldn't tell, but it's the truth. The first is that if I'm telling the real truth behind why I got my graduate degree is I wasn't ready to grow up and come off my parents' insurance yet. Perfectly legitimate. Like I went to South Carolina, I had, I took a couple of years, I got a graduate degree, it gave me a little more time to figure things out. So that was one option. For a lot of students who are uncertain. Other students, I tell, maybe get an internship or a fellowship, an entry-level position in a field or a location that you think you might like, but you're not ready to commit. And then the other personal story that I tell students is sort of cautionary, like, don't forget that you have to have a life and do something that makes you happy along the way. So if that means if you take a month off or 2 months off after graduation while you're applying for jobs and do something bananas, that's the time to do it, because I didn't. I went straight from job to job to job. So after a year in industry, I actually walked into my boss's office one day and said, I'm going to quit and go backpack Europe. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me like I was a crazy person, and I was blessed that I was a good employee, and he gave me a six-week leave, and I had my position when I came back, but I didn't do the thing that I should have done and actually experience life in a way that was really important to my personal development. I was so focused on my professional development. So take some time, do something, save money, do something crazy that you've always wanted to do. You won't always be able to take 6 weeks off.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important lesson to really teach students, is that they don't have to have it all figured out, that, you can still get from point A to point B. Maybe it's a little slower. And I love hearing different stories.
I'll have it figured out.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I still don't have it all figured out. I say that I think that right now, because I'm, turning, I'm saying on these podcasts, I'm turning 50 next month. So for me, I'm just like, I think I'm about 75% figuring it out. I mean, when you're working for 27 years, you you learn a lot, right? So I think at some point you do start to have, you'll never have it all figured out, but yes, you start to start figuring out. So I'd love to hear about your take on PR. So our agency focuses on paid media, and we entered into the earn, shared, own media arena. And that's why, we recently hired one of your students. The reason why I entered into that world is because I believe that PR has become a pay to play arena. I think that a lot of the stations and radio, all of them, it's always like, what are you going to give me if I'm going to put your information up on the air? And I keep seeing that more and more. What are your thoughts on PR? Is it the same old PR? Have things changed? How are you, what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear if you think I'm right on, or I'm totally crazy on that. But what are your thoughts on PR and how you're teaching it for people?
So I don't like to think of PR as a standalone. I don't think that any one of the communication strategies, paid, earned, any of that stands alone in today's marketing environment. I mean,
Yes,
it used to
correct.
be like back when we were in school, you have to hit them 3 times, get that billboard, get that
Yep.
print, get that radio.
Yep.
And now it's like hundreds of times, because the marketing environment or the communications environment is so saturated. It's much more one-on-one communication. And I don't think you can do that across any one avenue of communication. So I think it's necessary to do paid, earned, shared, and owned together. So I think public relations is part of a wheelhouse. I think it's part of sometimes what the client needs, or what the audience would best resonate with them is going to be purpose driven or experiential, or some crazy stunt that is going to break through the environment. And then based on that, telling that story, earning a share, earning a review, earning that's part of it. And it's not just earning the relationship with a media outlet. So many folks think of public relations as media relations, and I definitely believe that is way more robust than that. It's also earning the share, earning the earning the likes are kind of vanity, but it's earning the engagement, the endorsement from that audience that you're building a relationship with. So from a traditional definitional standpoint, I think public relations is public relations. It's developing mutually beneficial relationships between an organization and its publics. Definitionally, yeah, it's still the same. Execution, girl, no, it is crazy different. And the avenues and the ways you can do it, that's the best thing about public relations to me, is that it is only limited by how absolutely bananas crazy you can think.
Yep.
Those, as long as they're on message and research driven and strategically oriented towards the audience for the brand, I think you can do so much creatively with public relations that can be part of a comprehensive marketing plan that includes paid and owned assets, content marketing, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so great about today and working in the industry and working, we call it the PACE model, the paid, earned, shared, owned, media, coordinated efforts all together. Sure. We try to bring all those things together. And so I think that's what's so fun about the industry right now. And so what is your favorite class to teach? I'm curious where you lean. You're teaching a bunch of different parts of the industry.
I mean, it's the list of courses that I teach. When I came here, I was actually thought that I would teach these same courses over and over, but it feels like every sort of semester I'm getting these new challenges and opportunities to engage students. So I've taught classes in event planning and advocacy sort of as elective courses. I've taught research methods, but I really love, I call them the intro outro courses. I love, and I haven't taught an intro course in a very long time, but it's introducing students who are coming into the field as freshmen or sophomores and introducing them to this world that we love and that we work in. That's a lot of fun, helping them understand that the variety of the careers that they can have in public relations and advertising are really limitless. There's not an organization or a sector of society that doesn't need media, doesn't need communication support. And then seeing those students again in the capstone course, or our final course, which I'm now teaching, and maybe you'll think this is interesting. We have a student-run agency, and right now we have 3 paid accounts that we're working on. So the students are functioning as a real-world agency. So there's about a dozen seniors who are about to graduate But also in that class are sophomores and juniors who are taking the course as a way to introduce themselves to sort of the more longitudinal campaign planning process, as opposed to looking at it in pieces. So I love seeing it all come together for them and seeing them actually execute campaigns with real world budgets and come to me and say, you know, I want to buy a billboard, or I really think that it's what we need here is a paid digital ad. And I'd be like, all right, let's do it. Let's have some fun. And letting them actually in sort of this safe space experiment and try new communication outlets and see if it's something they want for their careers, or how to do that better and learn that skill in a real world environment. So it's a lot of fun.
So one of the things that was a disconnect for me when I was in college, now this was many years ago, right? So I'm hoping it's all changed now. But I never learned anything about media strategy or buying or selling of media. I really only learned that there was advertising, and it was almost more creative in a way. You know, I went to Duquesne University. I know they have completely revamped their communications, and they actually have a media school now. But I'd like to hear more about how, you know, in 20 years, how's the industry changed to maybe give students more of an understanding of what kind of careers are out there in media? Because, like I said, I never knew anything about this media, selling it, buying it, strategizing it, none of it. So didn't learn it, didn't hear of it, didn't know anything about it. So tell me a little bit about how it's evolved in 20 years.
Yeah, so as the program chair, I'm sort of familiar with all of the courses we offer, and we have been working really hard over the past few years to update our advertising curriculum in particular, to make sure that what we're offering students is a balance of both creative and media. So there's media buying. And then on the media buying side, updating constantly to include things like programmatic, to include online media buying and digital buying, because we're seeing time after time our graduates who are graduating from the advertising program going to major markets and mid-sized markets, and those are the careers that they're landing, and they're building livelihoods for themselves, because it too requires so much creativity and understanding of audience. So we start out in our curriculum, and I know a lot of other schools have very similar curriculums that are accredited universities, or accredited colleges like ours, because it's part of what it takes to become accredited, is that students have to have foundational courses. So they'll have to have courses in research methods or audience insights and analysis, so they understand how to develop an appropriate audience profile and make appropriate recommendations, and understand everything from color theory to budget allocation and how to work with numbers and things of that nature. We require law and ethics classes so that students understand the landscape and how to stay out of trouble. And then, you know, where those gray areas are and what people are doing to overcome, you know, cancel culture and all of these other types of issues that are emergent and trends that are emergent in our society. So we do a lot of those foundational courses, but then we allow students to take tailored elective courses within their own either advertising or public relations area of emphasis, their focus area, that help give them some expertise. And we require them to take enough of those courses that they're learning how to do things that are multifaceted approaches to their career pathways, so media or creative. Another thing, a revision that we have just made to our curriculum, is all students, either advertising or public relations, need to take writing courses and design courses. So the importance of writing has always been there, obviously, but on the advertising side, they take, we call it a copywriting class, but it sort of goes across all the different copy and creative writing approaches in advertising, and in public relations across all the different writing approaches. But then the design course was something that we're only now making a requirement for students on both sides, because we understand that if our graduates can't tell stories in visual mediums, whether that's video or print or digital, if they don't understand hierarchy and contrast and, so, you know, all of these types of things, that they're not going to be effective storytellers in the current communications landscape. So we're constantly adapting and updating our curriculum to reflect what's happening in industry, and also provide students an opportunity to tailor their experience here at the university, where they have to have these foundational skills that we know are imperative, but then they're also allowed some creative freedom on their electives.
So obviously COVID happened. And yes, and so reason why I bring this up is because I really think it impacted the communications careers. Just like it really took down the restaurant industry. It really did impact, a lot of these jobs. And so how has that, how are your students? How are they feeling? Are they still optimistic? Because I think it's coming back, right? I think we're back on track again. But I'm curious to just hear, how do you keep students optimistic when you have something that's so in your face saying that it might take you a lot longer to find a job?
I'm not gonna lie. When it happened, the capstone class that I had at that time, which includes one of your employees, I was very optimistic initially, but then as we approached graduation and I was hearing what was happening to my graduates and alums who were working in industry across the globe, I started to get a little anxious myself. So I understand where their fears were emanating from. I understood that their concern about it taking longer. A lot of students actually saw that as an opportunity to get a graduate degree because we all felt the industry would rebound, the economy would come back, and as a byproduct, the communications fields would bounce back as well, but maybe a little more slowly. So I thought that was a really smart approach, because I can tell you right now, my inbox every day has one or two emails with employers saying, "Hey, Geah, what kind of good graduates do you have for this? We need somebody for this," in all kinds of markets. So I'm seeing that the industry is bouncing back and that they're hiring. But another thing that I'm seeing happening that I'm concerned about is a lot of and across a lot of communications industries, I think they let go some mid-level and maybe even senior level employees as the pandemic was wreaking its havoc on the industry. And when they're hiring now, they're hiring entry-level positions, which is cool. But I'm also seeing at the same time a lot of burnout, a lot of frazzled, both young people and people that are our age. And I'm concerned that junior employees are being brought on board to fill roles that mid and senior level management or employees had filled before. So I'm very protective of my students and helping to train them and make them think about work-life balance and how to say no and how to engage with an employer that is
great. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, requiring a little more than and not investing in professional development, which is a sore point for
me. And you're actually correct, because we actually just hired somebody that was not only, I think, a year and a half out of college, and she was the marketing director. I mean, there was nobody else. Like, they had let go because of COVID. They let go of the whole team. And here is this, year and a half out of college, first job, is already at the top. And that makes it hard, I think, with hiring, because then you go to try to hire someone like that, and it's like, well, I'm already running all of this stuff. And then you're kind of saying to them, but where did you learn how to run that? And it's kind of like, oh, I taught myself. Well, how do you know you taught yourself right? And so we're finding a lot of that they kind of got into bad, patterns and didn't learn it the right way. So then you have to start, so then you're hiring somebody with more salary, but then you have to teach them all the right, so it is. I think you're definitely right that is definitely what is happening. How do you see the CMO role changing? I mean, I know I have a complete opinion on that, but I'd love to hear how somebody that's really teaching the future, and maybe one goal is to become a CMO in a corporate company or a brand or whatever. How do you see that role changing?
Well, I think in order to answer that question, I have to tell you how I feel like the corporate side, so the client side of industry, is shifting. I think they're becoming their own brand managers. In many instances, they're their own content spaces. They're not pitching stories, they're developing stories and pushing them out. So the person who's responsible for all of that now is a newsroom editor. They're a brand manager. They're like the roles and the tentacles and the things that they have to master, I think, are diversified beyond what they ever have been. And I don't think that that's going to stop. I think the requirement of a CMO to know more about, or at least be able to manage and identify support staff that can manage, I call them the tentacles. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but the tentacles of the communications field, but has to have a really solid understanding of that mix and how it works together. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think that what I'm reading is a lot of how CMOs don't know how to articulate to their C-suite what the marketing is doing for the brand.
Girl, that
And
ain't new.
it's not new, but what's happening now that there's an opportunity to push them out, COVID happens, and then you're looking around and you're saying, who do I push out first? It's the person that has never been able to articulate to the shareholders and the C-suite on how the marketing is actually doing to move the brand forward. And I think that position, I don't think it'll be called a CMO in the future. I think it's going to be something more of a data person, almost like really having to sit and live in the understanding of data for the brand and all the first party and what's happening, and then understanding how to connect all of that information to the ad agency or internally within house, in-house agencies that are a big thing right now. And then being able to turn that into reporting that would then be able to show everybody a return on investment. And so I think they have to be more data scientists moving forward. And, one thing I guess in every industry, and I'd love to hear your take. It sounds like to me that we might be similar in age. I was talking to somebody that's getting ready to retire, and he wants to hire like a 35-year-old to take over the CMO role, at this big company. And I'm like, excuse me? And he said, well, because I was 35 when I came in. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so here I am. I said, I think it should be a 50-year-old. I really think the 50-year-olds right now who are Gen Xers or really need to be leading right now. I think that they have the skills to talk to baby boomers. They have the skills to work with Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Y. And so what are your thoughts of being in your career at this age? Because I just feel like I'm just starting. Like, I feel like I feel like I have so much knowledge. I can do so much more at this age. And sometimes in age, as we get older, that's seen as a negative in this industry. So just curious what you think about this age, this age in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I know definitely in advertising and to some extent in PR, there is a great deal of ageism that happens, and particularly on the creative side. And I think you're right and there's a connection between why the 35-year-old may get a job over someone our age, because they've embraced the data side of things, that they have that data science understanding. I mean, we talk in our research methods class, one of our foundational courses, that if you don't understand how to do the research and how to measure the effects of your program, communications budgets are the first to get cut, because you're not showing a value, you're not showing the return on investment. So you have to know how to measure things like loyalty, like conversions, like things that impact the bottom line. Relationships are important, they're essential, but they also have to be measured, and there needs to be some way to report that. So I think you're right. I don't have any problem with 35 or 50 or whoever, whatever year old gets the job, as long as they are thinking critically about that data and how to use that data ethically, and how to make better decisions based on the research. I think the reason that some of the folks that are a little younger than us are getting those is because a lot of times folks who are in their 50s are set in their careers. And while we understand from a management perspective, perhaps, I don't think you can ignore what's happening and the availability of data points to help make really informed decisions. So I think it has to be a blend of both experience and a willingness to stay on top of those trends and data.
Yeah, I mean, I always believe it's the right person first, right? So I don't think it matters what color, what age, even maybe, I know there's a trend right now that I saw a company remove college degrees from their hiring process. Now, that scares me a little bit, because then how do you let somebody feel good about that degree they just spent all that money for, if everybody else who doesn't have to have one can just apply too? So for these professional jobs. So
I don't have any concern about that, actually. I mean, and I'm probably novel in academia. I don't have any concern about removing the university requirement and putting my kids up against anybody else that's applying, because I know they're trained well. I know they understand the industry and how to develop strategic recommendations and how to execute on those and how to measure success, because they're trained well. As you know, you've hired one. So
yeah. But I think it comes, and I think it really comes down to there's a maturity that happens in those 4 years that I have never seen happen. My brother didn't go to college, and I think he's a mature person, but I just definitely, there's just, when you step back, like you said, and take that extra time and maybe even go to graduate school, you just gain a lot more world knowledge and the maturity to maybe approach a job differently and treat people differently. I think there is, I always say college is really not college. It's not, university and college is not to sit and learn a bunch of things. What you're really learning is how to do your job. What is your job? Your professor gives you something to do. Your professor tells you what you need to do and how you'll get that A, right? You're like, this is the project. I need you to have it done on Friday at this time, right? There's all these consequences. Isn't that exactly the world of work?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm the boss. I need you to do this project. I'm going to give you the deadline of next Friday. If you cram and throw it together last minute, like some of us did in college, I know I did, it shows in the work, right?
It does. It really does.
So I think that's really what you learn in college, is really the ability to be able to work in an environment where it's pretty much project, graded, feedback, and on to the next one, right? And
Yeah.
deadline.
And if we do our jobs well, then in the academy, then it's also helping them to understand how to work with diverse people, different perspectives, work in groups, learn critical thinking skills, learn soft skills. Like there is a lot of other things. I agree with you beyond let's take this test on Tuesday or your assignment's due on Friday. There's a lot that happens in college, and there's a lot that happens in college outside of my classroom that I think is invaluable. Their opportunity to go hear speakers, to be part of sororities, fraternities, organizations that align with their interests, to have to take classes that they really hate and learn to force themselves to do things that they don't love. Because I don't know about you, but I didn't love every client. I didn't love everything that I had to do for every account. Sometimes you just got to figure out how to make the best of stuff. So
yeah, I read a lot about how you only get to do about 10% of what you love in your life, like the rest of it is just getting to do the part you love, right? So, you think of an actor, right? They love the actual camera time. Well, that might only represent 20% of the whole movie, right? It's the rest of it is reading and learning the lines and so on. So, yeah. And then I did want to go back to maybe like a 35 versus a 50-year-old, because I'm entering this new decade, and I really support the fact that my 35-year-old self couldn't touch my 50-year-old self. Do you know what I mean? So, I have kept up with what was going on. I have learned, I have stayed ahead. And so I just really hope that corporate America doesn't just think like, oh, I can get somebody cheaper at this age, because I think there is a lot of maturity that comes from age 35. As you get to that 50 range, and then 50, I mean, we could be working at least easily 20 more years. And so, so I just really hope the industry doesn't, because of COVID, doesn't really push out people that are over 50 that in my mind probably have a lot to give outside of just being able to be techie. Right. So
I don't think that, I mean, for students entering the industry new, for those of us who are more seasoned in our careers, I don't think COVID definitely had impact. It changed the way that we did a lot of things. It caused a pause that allowed for people to be more reflective about their employer, their work-life balance, their physical work space. So a lot of those decisions, I think, the pandemic did have an impact on them, but I don't think that's the only impact. I think the greater impact really is the digitization of society and the shift in mentality of modern consumers, and the importance of purpose, and the importance of standing for something other than a sale, and the trust or the transparency and authenticity of communication. Like all of those things are important. So it sounds like you're the type of person that was the always curious, always learning, and wanting to do it. But there's also, I think, a lot of folks out there who maybe were younger and were curious and understand those things that might be competitive. But I agree. I don't know that somebody straight out of college is going to succeed and have a work-life balance and not have a complete breakdown and burnout. If they're led into a leadership role straight out of college, they need to be in an environment that's supportive to their professional development, and that helps them to achieve what we've achieved in our careers, which I believe to be success. I am doing what I want to do, and I love at least 10% of it. So
yeah.
I think I'm successful.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you think of Gen Z. So I believe Gen Z is going to be the best workforce out of all of us. Did I say Z? Yes, because Gen Y is millennial. Gen Z is right in college right now. So they are in high school. I think Gen Z, this would be more of a question for my media director. I think Gen Z is maybe 12 to like 22 right now, or maybe that.
I have to Don't tell my kids. I'd have
Okay.
to.
Yes. Okay.
But you're
So
talking about the college age, the people that I'm teaching right now. You believe they're going to be a great addition to the workforce.
I believe that they're going to surpass, I think they're going to be the best workforce out there. And I will tell you why. So I think the baby boomers didn't get it right. I think they were very much old school butts in seats. They had this very much like, work 80 hours a week, don't have a life, put your job first, right? So they didn't get it right. So then Gen Xers come in, and Gen Xers are very much, in my mind, they're more techie. I know my first computer was not until I was about 28, I think, my first computer that I owned. But I had computers in college, so the 90s to 94. I think my first cell phone was maybe like 25 or whatever. So, but I was able to start this company just because of the digital revolution, so just being able to do all those things because of the digital revolution. So I think that's, Gen X has a lot. Gen X can also communicate with Y and baby boomers, right? So you got that going. Then you bring these millennials in. I love them dearly, but I don't think they got it completely right. And I think they've brought a lot to the surface in the world. And I think they have really been able to change this work-life balance. And I know they're the biggest group of workers right now, but they were also raised by baby boomers, right? And I think where they kind of got it wrong is they focused more on me and not we. They have a harder time being part of a team. And, I found ones that are so amazing. And then I found ones that are completely, to me, they're one edge of the spectrum, right? It's either they're amazing and they're thoughtful and they're thankful and they're learning, or they just can't, they're just like disrespectful, right? So this is Generation Z was raised by Gen Xers. So, and they've always had a computer in their hand. They probably had a phone. They were teething on phones, right? And
Probably.
And I think that the Gen Xers taught them how to not be the millennial, the bad millennial. I mean, I think millennials are great. I have a lot of millennials on my team, and I all of them are amazing. But I think sometimes they miss the boat on, how to talk to a baby boomer, or, there needs to be respect, right? There needs to be respect for those who were, maybe they don't have the computer background. Maybe they're not as sophisticated with cell phones and all that kind of stuff, but you shouldn't be treating them that way, right? So I just think Gen Z is the bridge to all of them. I'm curious. That was a long discussion. This is your interview, not me. But anyways, tell me your thoughts on Gen Z. You're teaching them right now. What are you seeing?
So I will comment on Gen Z, but I'm going to build up to it a little bit.
Yeah.
When I was in industry, I managed internship programs at both of the agencies I worked at. So I intersected with the college students then. I was an adjunct for 5 years before I went and got my PhD. I taught for 3 years while I was getting my PhD, and I've taught for 8 years here. So I have intersected with the college age crowd across several generations. Certainly not baby boomers. I'm not that old, but and I want to say that I feel like there's always been this pattern. There's been sort of a third of the ones that I deal with are like, overachievers, go get them, hot, like ready to learn, ready to engage, ready to be the lead, to take the next step, to learn the next thing. There's about a third that the world hasn't seen yet. Like, they have a lot of potential, but maybe they're quiet, maybe they're introverted, maybe they don't have the confidence. I'm not really sure that there's always the same reason why that middle third just wasn't the standout, but they're not the
I was actually them. That was who I was in college, just so you know. Okay. So I was them. So yes, go ahead. And then who's the third?
And then the last third, and this doesn't necessarily mean equal parts, are kind of C's get degrees. Like, I'm going to come into your classroom and I need to know exactly what it takes to finish this class and be done. Mm-hmm. I've seen success, big time success across all of those groups over the years. I've seen super high overachievers burn out, flame out, go into other fields, end up becoming nurses, all kinds of stuff. And I've seen C's get degrees kids end up at leading positions at McCann and Saatchi and doing pretty amazing things. So I don't know that I can say as a cohort that any generation is better than another. I think what the trick is to recognize the potential in individuals that maybe are unseen. Those mid-range kids, that middle group that you and I came from, are some of the ones that I think are the most wonderful to work with, because they're still passionate and enthusiastic, but they haven't always gotten an A. They didn't always get the trophy. They weren't always the best. And one of the cool things that I think that happens, because I've taught in 2 different geographic areas, South Carolina, where the university sits in a capital city that is surrounded by industry, lots and lots and lots of opportunity there. And then here at West Virginia, which is very geographically separated. Our closest sort of mid-sized metro market is Pittsburgh. And but Pittsburgh has a lot of other institutions that are feeding into those jobs. They were competing with Penn State. So what I find at West Virginia, as contrasted with my experience at South Carolina, and I don't want to make wholesale comparisons, but I see the kids here at West Virginia hungrier than any other group of kids that I've intersected with. And because of my work with PRSSA, the professional student organization, I've met a lot of kids who are across a lot of different areas. And I will say it again and again, like there's something about, and I don't want to say my kids are underdogs, but they're having to fight harder and work harder because there's fewer opportunities. A lot of the kids are coming from, we're a land grant institution. So a lot of the kids are coming from West Virginia, which doesn't have a metropolitan area at all. They're coming in. I remember my first trip, I took students to DC, but I took them there and they got out of their comfort zone and they networked and they went to every session they could, while other kids are using it as an opportunity to go scooter around town and sightsee and whatever. Like I think there's a lot of different factors. I say all of that to say, I think there's a lot of different factors that play into the passion and the hunger.
Definitely.
And
yeah. And I think to be more clear, because I'm not trying to generalize, I think that the thing I'm trying to really say is that I think because they were raised with more technology, they had more opportunity to learn more. They're no nonsense. I think their brains move faster than the rest of us. They're very polite. I noticed this more. I mean, because we have a couple, some of my best employees right now are my entry level and my 2 years or my under 2 years. And it's really because I just feel like they were raised by Gen Xers. And I think that, baby boomers and Gen Xers, baby boomers were raising their kids to say, this was what was so terrible in our life. So we're going to protect you from that. And then Gen Xers are like, wow, that was too much protection. That was too much helicopter parenting. That was, you know what I mean? So I'm really talking more about the student and how they work. I'm talking more about maybe the respect for older generations, maybe the respect for business, maybe for the respect of not knowing it all. I think they just seem a little bit more willing to learn and not know it all. That's what I'm noticing. So.
That's awesome. And I can certainly, I know you'll have other entry-level positions coming up, so I can help you identify some, because it sounds like that's the perfect fit for your company.
Because we have our leadership team has been, set up and good. And we're now molding below the leadership team and trying to bring up the superstars of tomorrow. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I also want to thank you very much for our superstar employee that we were able to hire from your learning. She speaks nothing but very highly of you. So I thank you. Do you have any questions for me before we close up?
I want to know, and I bet many of the other young people who are listening to this podcast, I want to know what you look for in your perfect internship candidate or your perfect entry-level position candidate. I got a couple of little teases from some things you say, but I'd like you to lay it out for us.
You know what? I'm really glad you asked that, because I actually was going to go into that and talk that through, and we ran out of time. So thank you for asking that. So what I'm seeing is some of these resumes from entry level, they're either coming over with no experience or nothing on them, or there's maybe 3 or 4 internships. What we really are looking for is some real work. So they're actually in the programs, they're actually in Facebook setting up a campaign. I will hire somebody all day long that can showcase that they had 3 internships, no real job, but actually can come in and start on the ground being a doer, right? Like, we'll teach them all the other stuff, But at least when they get here, we don't have to start from the very beginning. And I think that, is the change that is happening with the students today. I think that colleges and universities are teaching students more how to do something when they come out of college instead of, I really walked out of college, 17 years ago, and I understood how to learn and get that project and get that, A per se, but I didn't really know how to do anything. I walked away with, what do I do next? And I think if I could give any advice to students, get those internships. And I also gave advice to a young woman that we hired from Sandusky, Ohio. She ended up not having any internships, and she graduated during COVID, and she ended up not having a job, and it was 1 year out of school. So she reached out to me. That's another big part of it. Be bold. Reach out to the president of an ad agency. You'd be surprised on LinkedIn. I might respond, and I did. So I responded to her and I said, what do you need help on? I'd be happy to help. She said, well, I'm really concerned. I want to move to Pittsburgh. So she wanted to move to Pittsburgh, she decided, and she's read about our agency and thought we were a great agency. And she said, I don't have an internship and I don't really have any experience. And I don't know how to get my foot in the door because I've already been 1 year out of school and COVID happened. And I basically said to her, do you have a friend of the family or do you know anybody that will let you work for free for them? And she's like, you know what, I think I do. And so I said, you go to that person and you're going to say, I'm going to do your social media for you, or I'm going to do something for you, change your website, update your website, do search engine marketing, whatever. I'm going to go do something for you for free. And then you're going to build a resume. You're going to build a portfolio. Yes, it's for free, but nobody's going to just pay. If you can't even get a job right now, so nobody's going to pay you to do it. So just do it for free. And I think there's a lot of controversy around, some of the millennials being like, you should never work for free. And I hear a lot of more of the early 20-year-olds saying, I'd work for free. I would get my foot in the door doing something for free. So there's a lot of controversy, I think, between that. And I would love to hear more, for students in the future. But I do think that having some real experience, actually being able to go in and say, oh, I've set up campaigns on Facebook. I did it for free for this company over here, but here are my results. And she ended up following my advice. She got a job at a restaurant. She got them on Instagram. She set up all their social channels. I don't think she ended up doing any paid media. They weren't letting her do that yet, but she increased their Instagram followers they had like 2, and then they had like 500 within like 3 months, you know what I mean? So I say that that's the best way, is work for free, get something to be able to get something tangible to walk back to the where you're interviewing, especially when you're entry level. Because I could hire somebody all day long that is just been in internships than somebody maybe that had a whole year experience out in a job that really didn't have anything of a skill that we could use. So I hope that answers that. That was the long version. Sorry.
Sure. No, that's perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you for all your knowledge and what you can, really tell students today, and even just the career path that you have taken. So thank you for being on the HMDL podcast today.
Thank you. Y'all have a great one.
Thank you, Geah, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. That was a lot of incredible information. If you like what you heard, be sure to follow us on all of our social channels at Hoffmann Murtaugh. I'm Shea Murtaugh, and we'll see you on the next episode.